Hey guys, this is Morgan J. Ingram here with another SDR Chronicles, and I have another special guest coming on the Chronicle today, Richard, all the way from the UK. I'm gonna drop some knowledge down today about how to effectively use cold call recordings and your call recordings to get more results in your sales development role. So without any further ado, I'm gonna let Richard introduce himself, and we're gonna dive into the topic today.
Thanks, Morgan. Really happy to be on the SDR Chronicles. I'm a keen follower of the channel, so get a lot of value out of it myself, and so do my team. So I'm Richard. I'm a co-founder and head of the sales team at Refract. We're a fairly new startup, headquartered in Newcastle in the northeast of England. Although myself, I'm actually based in London. But yeah, so we are a company we've started at the fresh beginning in 2015, and yeah, we've got I guess a similar kind of SaaS sales structure as a lot of the American companies do, where we've got an SDR team and an account executive team, and I kind of oversee all of that. And yeah, funny enough, although we're a British company, actually probably about 80% of the clients we work with tend to be in North America. And yeah, really excited to talk to you about call recordings.
Awesome. So let's just dive right in. How long have you been actually actively listening to your cold calling recordings?
So this probably started probably about 6 months ago, and I tell you what actually happened. I had one of my sales reps was had made a call, and that call ended up being about 20-25 minutes long. Got in a lot of in depth with the prospect. You'd expect having a call that long would typically lead to some kind of positive next step. And he came off the call and said, Rich, you know what? I just came off the call there, and it went brilliant. Great opening. I got the prospect engaged in a lot of questions. Told him a lot about what we do, and then the call just hit a sort of dead end. He didn't want to go to that next stage of setting up a demo or whatever it was. And I just thought, well, it sounds strange to me that was the outcome. And so I kind of thought, what if I actually had the insight into what actually happened in that conversation? Because all I was doing was taking off the actual the story of my sales rep. I was only party to one part of that conversation. I couldn't hear what the prospect was saying, how he was responding to the questions that he was apparently asking, and all the rest of it. So we started recording our calls, and it just opened my eyes into, right, what makes a successful conversation?
Right.
What do the best reps do that the reps on the phone compare to the reps that don't have as much success? What are our prospects saying that what are we saying to prospects that's getting them interested? What are we saying that's not getting them interested? And it kind of made me think, why aren't we doing this more? This is just perfect intelligence helping us be more successful as a sales team. And I guess from that point, we kind of embrace this aspect of call recording and sharing.
Awesome. So, couple questions from that. One, how would cold call recordings would you say you listen to it from a rep each week? Is there like a recommended how many you listen to, or it just depends on the rep?
I mean, let's be honest, and there's only so much time in the day for coaching.
Right.
Coaching is massively important, and should be done by every sales manager. But essentially, it still requires time. I'm still a quota carrying sales manager, and I can't invest my whole day in listening to call recordings.
Right.
I think it's important to get some structure into how to do this, and what we're saying is that you don't need to listen to every single call your guys are making. It's too much. They'll feel too much pressured, and you haven't got the time to do that either. So I think having some kind of metric, such as what we have at Refract, which is sort of saying, like, per rep, just record 2 calls per week, something as low a number as that. I've got the scalability to listen to those calls and provide really great feedback, and it gives me a good sense as to what is the current messaging skills of my guys, and are they doing the things that I want them to be doing. So yeah, I think every company is different from the companies that we work with as far as how many calls they record. Some reps require more coaching than others, and so they will actively listen to more of those calls. But yeah, I think having some sort of low level, manageable target of listening to call recordings is the best way to do it.
Awesome. And, with those call recordings, some calls don't go good, right? Like some calls are not good at all. So the question is when a rep, really knows that they've messed up or it's a bad call, how do you kind of tell them like, hey, we need to actually go over this call for constructive criticism so you can become a better sales professional at the end of the day?
Great question, Morgan. And let's be honest, everyone has bad calls.
Right.
Everyone, you'd be lying if they said that every call they had was a perfect call. As salespeople, no matter what level we're at or how experienced we are, we're always learning better ways of doing things. And sometimes you're having a bad day and you just mess up a call because you're not in the right frame of mind. And the way I'd like to kind of flip it and the way I position it is actually if I'm gonna listen back to one of my guys' calls, I don't necessarily want to listen to the great calls all the time because they're the calls that you learn least from.
Right.
You want to hear the calls that haven't gone so well, and particularly those calls where they haven't gone well, but the salesperson doesn't really know why they didn't go well. The example that I gave before of my team member, he thought it was a great call, but actually, I'm sure if I listened to it, there was lots of reasons of why it didn't end up the way it did. Exactly. So having that kind of perspective of this didn't go well. What I want to do is I want to get a second set of eyes and ears to what happened and to let me know, what happened, what could I have done differently, and if I as a salesperson, if I know that I could have asked a specific question at this specific moment of a call, or I could have phrased this differently when I tried to overcome an objection, or I could have closed the person down to an appointment at that stage in the call rather than waiting 10 minutes too late.
Right.
If I have that level of insight, then I know that next call I do, if I put those things right, I'm going to be more successful. So yeah, it is definitely a cultural thing. It's about getting people understanding that listening to calls and calls that haven't gone well is not something to bash people over the head about. It is about helping them address a weakness and improve that next time around.
Of course. And so when you dive into those calls, and like you said, everyone has a bad call. I have had it. You've had it. Everyone has them. It's just you sometimes have mishaps. Yeah. What within those calls, what do you normally find is the gap? Like, is it they didn't ask enough questions? Did they just back out too soon? Did they, as I like to say, word vomit on them with too much value, where they're like, this is ridiculous? So like, what kind of happens? What's the trend you see?
It varies differently from rep to rep, and right. Given the nature of what we do, and I'm constantly speaking to different sales leaders, and I ask them exactly the question that you've asked me, Morgan. What is the most common mistake that your sales reps make when they're on the phone? And a lot of the time, they don't know the answer. And the reason for that is usually because they don't listen to call recordings. So if they don't know what is the most common mistake their guys are making, then there's no way of them to really improve. Right. However, the ones that do have that insight, I'd say, and this is probably appropriate for my team, probably appropriate for me as a salesperson as well, and probably a general trend across the industry, is that they simply don't ask enough questions. I think in the modern day of sales, our prospects are demanding more value from salespeople. Our prospects are getting hounded more and more by more and more companies trying to sell them different services, and because of that, their time has become more precious. They've got more noise that they need to get through, and they're demanding more value. And I think one of the key ways of bringing value is being inquisitive, asking them questions about themselves, the situation, their role. If you've got people asking you questions without them telling them everything about yourself and what you do, they're gonna listen. You're gonna get them talking. You get people talking. You're gonna have more chance of getting them closed down and bought into listening back to what you do. Like in life, Morgan, you're at a party or an event. And who likes the person that comes up to them and tells them all about themselves without asking any questions about you and what you do? Nobody likes that person. You've got no interest. So it's exactly the same in sales. The same application. It's the same scenario. Ask more questions, get more inquisitive, go deeper with your questioning and understanding of that company, and so the sales calls will often reap greater rewards.
And so with those questions, because I believe that that's actually one of the best things you can do is ask the questions to give the most value. But how do you ask the right amount of questions before you ask too many questions to where it's like this is a little bit too much? I feel like I'm getting interrogated.
I definitely can see where you've came that question from, because at the end of the day, if you've cold called someone,
yeah,
they're not just gonna happily. You've caught them at a time that they weren't expecting your call.
exactly.
They're not necessarily going to say, actually, I've got 45 minutes to talk to you, Richard. It doesn't work that way. But I think what we have to understand in our sales teams is what do we want to achieve out of that initial call. We want to understand whether this is the right person that we want to be speaking with. We want to qualify that person. Is this an ideal customer profile for us? And I think really the key function of the SDR of the SDR team when making cold calls, it's about creating an opportunity. It's an opportunity to have a further conversation with that prospect. And I think without going into so much detail and kind of going into that deep level of discovery that you may have on, for example, a discovery call as a second stage, it's about doing just enough to warrant further time and effort into investing into that prospect. So there's definitely a careful balance, and I think you'll find that some prospects might want to speak with you longer than others, but I think a lot of it is just, first of all, having an understanding about how much time is this person going to give you realistically, and a lot of that is often a kind of a second nature that you get on the call. Does this person sound like they want to get you off the phone? In which case, let's get that person closed down to an appointment right there and then. Or is this person willing to open up a bit more and give us more information? If so, brilliant.
Great. And so let's kind of dive back to the call recordings. How are you kind of influencing or promoting or kind of like spearheading the peer-to-peer call recordings? Because I feel like maybe sometimes other peers don't want other peers to hear their calls at the end of the day. So how are you putting them in groups? Or are you just like, hey, like it's kind of like whoever you trust with the constructive criticism?
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, because I think as salespeople, we are naturally competitive.
Yeah.
We don't always want like everyone else knowing our tricks of the trade, and like what works well for us, and maybe that's becoming more and more like a little bit of an old-fashioned thing in sales. And I think what we need to understand is, for everyone to exceed, for everyone to get better, everyone's going to have their own strengths and weaknesses on a sales team. Some people are going to be better at building a rapport very early on in a conversation. Other people are going to be stronger at asking discovery questions. Other people are going to be more effective at getting around gatekeepers. All these kind of things. We need to understand that if we want to build up our skill set, we have to leverage the expertise and skills of those around us, the same people who are living and breathing the same, the same nightmares and horror stories that we can find ourselves in sales on a daily basis. So one way that we've done this at Refract is, I guess, a key part of our technology, which we embrace in our own sales team, is actually taking a call recording and inviting other members of the team to listen to specific moments of a call. So I'll give you an example of that. The other week, one of my reps, they came off a call that they recorded, and they'd came across a really strange objection from the prospect, one that just they'd never actually heard it before.
Right.
And because they were so unprepared for it, the call just kind of fell flat, and it just hit a dead end. He came off it and was like, wow, I just didn't even know how to come back to that objection. It's just something that we've never had before.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens to the best of us, right, Morgan?
Yeah,
so
I have no idea what just happened.
What? So what we did, I was like, so what he did is he marked up that moment of the call of when that happened. He invited other members of the team, including myself and other people on the sales team, to dive into that call, to that moment, to listen back to what happened. And what we found was we actually had three people who listened back to that moment of the call.
Yeah.
Each commented as to what they would have done in that scenario. And in fact, somebody on the team just so happened to have come across that same objection about 2 weeks beforehand. Oh, wow. I managed to get around it. But because they didn't tell anyone about it, that was just locked in their phone call. And it was like, oh, actually, I actually had this exact same scenario happen to me 2 weeks ago. This is what I said, and this is what it led to. And that kind of shared understanding was like, wow, yeah, well, brilliant. Without collaborating, inviting people to listen to that call, that rep would have not understood how to overcome that objection again if they were to come across it the next day. So it is really about just getting people embraced in that sort of social learning, and just get really kind of understanding and being mature that it's not about being private around how good we are on the phone. It's about leveraging everyone in the company and in the teams, and everyone's got their own individual strengths that we can all benefit from.
Yeah, I mean, because teamwork makes the dream work. So it's like you got to have that. So kind of want to talk about, you talked about it, so I want you to dive a little bit deeper into it. Social learning, how's that come into play?
I mean, I point to social learning, and I've read a lot of your stuff about it, Morgan, and you're completely right in what a lot of the stuff that you say. Like, I think the social as a thing in sales is becoming so much bigger. Yeah. In not just kind of how we interact with prospects, but how we as a sales team interact with each other. The whole thing about social learning is that collaboration piece, and it's a big part of that is sharing best practice. So one thing that I say is, if I listen to a call that goes really well for someone, if I listen to a brilliant call, I want everyone else in my team to listen to that call, because I want them to understand what made that call so great. You want people to understand, what does a great call look like? What does great objection handling look like? And the only way that you're going to do it, or the best way of doing it, is to show and let people listen to examples of where that has happened for your company. So we're constantly sharing great examples of. I hear one of my team, ask a brilliant discovery question, for example, that's really opens up the prospect and gets them just lavishing down their pains and challenges. What I want is, I want everyone else in the sales team to listen to this discovery question and listen to how the prospect responded. Like, everyone build that question into your sales conversations, or have that in your armory, and you will have more successful calls. And again, it just comes down to that teamwork, collaboration, sharing a best practice, and helping everyone succeed.
I think that's completely right, and I think that definitely will help the team at the end of the day. Is like, if you can listen, then you can provide the right value. And I just wholeheartedly believe that, since there's so much noise, you have to bring some value to that person, because time is such a valuable asset. And so I kind of want to ask on this end. I know that for us here at Terminus, like, something that we really talk about a lot is the cold calls that we have that are actually sent over to the account executive. We want the call recordings inside of that opportunity, so before they get on the demo, they have a little bit of context before they go into that first demo. So kind of want to talk about how your SDR team, do you give the call recordings to the account executive? And if you do that, how beneficial is it for that account executive to have that initial call recording of that cold call?
Well, going back to my previous company, the relationship between the SDRs and the account executive was often like a write-up of notes that was in Salesforce, and it would be, these were the key points of the call. The problem with that is that the SDR would often come off a phone call, they've scribbled down lots of notes, and then they're looking at their notes and they're like, wow, I can't even read my own handwriting, or wow, I think I've caught everything. I've managed to record everything that was on that call. But if we're on a call and our head's in the game, we don't always have the ability to really, listen to what our prospect's saying, ask questions, and have that phone conversation while writing down everything that's happened on the call. We also don't have the ability of having context. There might have been a question that you asked on your call that the prospect responded particularly well to, and maybe that was because that is a key value area for the prospect that needs to be honed in on. And again, it's difficult to really get that across with just putting notes into a CRM. So so going back to my current situation is, because we've embraced calls now, before I get on a demo, one of my team get on a demo, one of the account executives, what they will do is they will listen back to that call, and they are able to not just see the notes from the SDR, but they can actually get some context. They can hear exactly what happened, exactly the information that was gleaned from the conversation, what were the key value areas for the AE to hone in on, and everything's fresh in the memory. You know, they're going into that demo literally 5 minutes beforehand have listened to a call and the key points of that call. Yeah. So that in return, the demo that you deliver, it makes you as an account executive sound much more attentive, because the prospect's like, wow, you really listened to what I told the SDR last week. It also helps you be much more relevant and valuable. So you're not going into a show up and spew up of your product. You're saying, you know, one of the key things that I think you mentioned to my colleague Richard last week was X. Let me show you how we can address that with our product. And by nature, those conversations become more valuable, more powerful, more successful.
Awesome. Yeah, that's something that we've been doing, and I definitely have seen success with it, because you can get that initial opening to that person so you understand what's going on. And I also have a question for you guys. With the call recordings, because this is something I did, do you kind of encourage your new reps or even veteran reps to continuously always listen to their calls themselves, so they can kind of see the speed of how they're talking and just kind of see how they can perform better?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes there's no better way of kind of improving by self-reflecting and doing that self-assessment piece. And how you think you sound on the phone until you actually listen back. You know, some people don't like to listen to their own voice on the phone, do they? But they get a bit freaked out by it. But often that's because they'll pick up on little things that they say, like filler words that they'll use, or a tone of voice, or they're speaking too quickly, and maybe they said something on the call that at the time they thought the prospect would have heard and understood, but actually when you play it back, you're like, clearly that was just a complete mumble, and the prospect just nodded and agreed and pretended that they understood. So I think on that basis, it is important to listen to calls and to listen to your own calls. And self-critique is often, one of the best ways of helping yourself improve. Do you listen to your own calls at Morgan at Terminus? Do you sometimes listen to kind of how that played out, and kind of giving yourself a self-reflection?
Yeah, so I'm the person who doesn't like listening to myself. So like, it's just like, I don't like it. I'm like, all right, I guess I'll listen to what I did. So I do listen to my calls. I encourage everyone else to, anytime there is a call that didn't go like the way it seemed, we always have somebody to break it down. Like, that's one of the things that I've learned, and one of the things I'll continue to do. So yeah, I listen to my calls, and the more that I do that, the more beneficial it is for me, because I really can see, okay, like, I just didn't ask the right question there, or like I said that way too fast, or I should have actually pushed a little bit more there, because I don't think they understood what I just said. So yes, I listen to my calls. I think it's super beneficial if you really want to be good at your craft.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another key point in that is actually understanding what you might have wanted to ask on the call, but you missed out, you forgot. And sometimes that could be something so valuable. It could be understanding a decision-making process. It could be asking about other stakeholders that would be involved in any sort of decision. And it can be the difference between you just jumping back on the phone with that prospect and say, oh, one of the things I wanted to ask you, but I forgot, was this. And I think it just gives you that opportunity to provide a much more rounded picture of yourself as a salesperson. You're much more thorough, and you're there to, you've got the kind of the classic battle between the SDRs and the account executives. The account executives always want more information from the SDRs around what happened on the call, what am I focusing on, and it just allows you to be doing your job as efficiently as possible to kind of avoid any of that friction that can sometimes transpire between the two teams.
Awesome, Richard. So massive value you've brought so far. One last question before we close it out. What is the one piece of advice you would give to new SDRs and just veteran SDRs on how to really dominate the role and to have massive success?
Never rest on your laurels. Prospecting is, in my opinion, the key function of the whole sales team. If you haven't got the stuff coming in the top of the pipeline, you might think you've got lots of great stuff in there, but things can happen, things can change. You need to have that engine going at all time. So, I encourage everyone to just be busy, get your activity up, and always, never think that you're doing a good job. always think that you could be doing better and really maximizing that funnel and pipeline.
Awesome, Richard. Well, thanks so much for coming on the Chronicle today. Really have enjoyed it. Great conversation on how to really effectively use call recordings to improve your craft. As I always say, guys, keep dialing, and I'll see you guys soon.